Baruch Hashem. We're up to chapter 49, verse 12. These are very difficult verses to translate because these are poetry. But we'll do the best we can. We have Rashi to help us. Chaklili einayim miyayin. Yes.
Share.
Wow, you want me to make you the co-host? Be my pleasure. My co-host. Okay, beautiful. Chaklili einayim miyayin. He is red-eyed from wine. We'll see what that word means. Rashi says chaklili means was shown odem, an expression of redness. Chaklilus einayim is a term that appears in Proverbs. Shekain derech shosei yayin einayim ma'adimin. Those who drink wine, their eyes become bloodshot. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Well, then shinayim michalav, and their teeth are white from the milk. They drink so much wine, and Judah is going to be drinking so much wine and drinking so much milk, his eyes will be red and his teeth will be white. Rashi says there'll be so much milk because there'll be in his land mirah tov, good pastures, edrei tzom. And adom einayin yeh, he'll be red-eyed, mirov yayin, from an abundance of wine, will ben shenayim yeh, mirov chalav. So I'll have so much milk and wine. Then Rashi brings down Unkel's explanation. Einayim means mountains. From there, he's going to look to far away. Like a spring. And the outpourings of the wine presses. Meaning to say, his eyes are red from looking far away, or from the springs. Okay. And also the Uncle says that the teeth means the teeth of the boulders. Very esoteric translations. It's poetic. Verse 13. This is a very important Rashi for the yeshiva world. Chapter 49, verse 13. Zevulun lechof yamim yishkon. Zevulun will dwell by the seashore. Vehu lechof anios. Hello, Dan. Good afternoon. Zevulun. 13. Zevulun lechof yamim. Chof is the beach, so the seashore. Lechof yamim, by the seashore he'll dwell. Vehu lechof anios. He shall be at the ship's harbor. V'yarketo al tzidon. Yarketo, Rashi, means the end of his boundary. The end of his border is near Sidon. What does it mean that Zevulun is by the seashore dwelling? Rashi says that it means that his al chof yamim tiartzo, his land will be on the seashore. Chof is separ, the border. But Liam Netzoy Tadir, Zevulun will always be there at the shore of the ships, at the site of the harbor. Shaniot Meviot Sham Prakmatia. The ships bring in business. Shaya Zevulun Osek Prakmatia. Zevulun was the one who engaged in business. Umamtim Mazon was Sheva Yisachar. And then Zevulun would always be engaged in business, and he's going to provide food for Yisachar. Vehemos kim b'Torah. So Zevulun is engaged in business, and Yisachar engages in Torah study. Hushamar Moshe, that's why Moshe said, Smach Zevulun b'tzeisecha, v'Yisachar b'olecha. Zevulun should rejoice in your excursions, and Yisachar in your dwelling places. Zevulun yotzei b'pragmatia, v'Yisachar osek b'Torah b'olecha. Zevulun engages in business, and Yisachar engages in Torah and the tents. And so this is You heard of this ever? A Yisachar Zevulun deal? Has anybody ever heard of a Yisachar Zevulun deal? Yisachar Zevulun deal is there's a guy in yeshiva, and then he's got a friend who's working. And so they sign a contract that Zevulun is going to give him a portion of his profits, and in exchange, Yisachar, the yeshiva bachar, is going to give him a portion of his schar for learning. And that's called the Yisachar Zevulun relationship. So I know people who do that. Do you know anybody who does that, Akiva? Well, yeah. No, not exactly. It's yeah, I guess you could do it, but the Yisachar Zevulun relationship is like one guy says, I'll be the Zevulun and you'll be the Yisachar and we'll split it. I know somebody who does that. The schlar, the reward. The reward. Did you fix your tire, Kobe? Good for you. Baruch Hashem. Makes me happy. All right. So now we're up to Yisachar. So remember we said Yisachar is studying Torah. Yisachar chamor garem. Yisachar is a strong-boned donkey. What does that mean? What does that mean that Yisachar is a strong-boned donkey? Rovates bein hamishpatayim. He crouches between the boundaries. What does this mean? Let's see what Rashi says this means. Yisachar chamor garem. Chamor balat tzamos. Yisachar is a strong-boned donkey. Kach sovel all Torah. He bears the yoke of Torah like a strong donkey, which they load up with a heavy burden. So the donkey is basically Yisachar, and the burden is the Torah. Hello, Yoni. Rovates bein hamishpatayim. He's always crouching between the boundaries. What does that mean? Like a donkey which goes out by day and night, and he has no place to sleep. When the donkey wants to rest, it rovates bein hatchumim. It crouches down between the areas, betchumei ayarot, the tchumen of the cities, to which it brings the merchandise. So just like the donkey has no place to sleep, so too the Yisachar is always studying Torah. He never really sleeps. He's always studying Torah, so he's just crouching. He just catnaps. The true Torah scholar barely sleeps. Like they say about the Vilna Gaon, look, this is probably a myth. In almost all certainty, it's a myth. But they don't tell such myths about me and you. What do? They say about the Vilna Gaon that he used to sleep 15-minute intervals, a few hours a day. Like he would be up the whole day, and then like 3 or 4 times a day, he would sleep 15-minute intervals. And to keep himself awake so he could study more Torah, he would keep his feet in ice water. That's like Yisachar. He's always crouching. He's never sleeping. I mean, it's almost certainly not factually accurate because it's probably impossible to do that, but still. Vayar menucha kitov that haaretz ki na'ima. Really, the problem here. This is my advice, Kobe. I want you to hear this. The problem is not how many hours you sleep. You could sleep 5 hours. You could sleep 6 hours. You could sleep 7. You could 8. There's no problem. You should sleep as much as you want. The problem is what you do with your time when you're awake. That's the issue. That's the issue. You have to maximize your efficiency and spend your time on good things. So, Vayar menucha kitov at aretz ki na'ima. Yisachar sees a resting place and it's good, and the land because it was pleasant. Vayet shechmo l'spol, vahi lamas oved. He bent his shoulder to bear it. He became an indentured laborer. What does that mean? Rashi says, he saw a resting place that it was good. He saw his portion in the land of Israel, that it was a blessed land, good for fruits. It was good for fruits. Vayechi mo'aspo, and he bent his shoulder to bear the yoke of Torah. And he became, what does it mean? He became for all of his brothers a indentured servant. Rashi says, L'ispoklahem hora'os shel Torah. Yisachar is the one who studies Torah, so he became a servant to everybody. He has to provide Torah rulings. V'sitre iburin, arrange the leap years, as it states, Umimnei Yisachar yodea bina leitim. He knew what to do for Israel. And that's Yisachar. Vayechi mo, he lowered his shoulder. And Onkelos gave a totally different explanation. He bent his shoulder to bear battles, to conquer territories, because they lived on the border. Okay, now up to the tribe of Dan. Dan yadin amo ke'achad shiftei Yisrael. Dan will judge his people like one of the tribes of Israel. So Rashi has an approach. Just a methodological approach to Rashi. Rashi thinks, and no verse in the Torah stands by itself, that it's always like a commentary or a prophecy on the later verses. So there was a tribe, there was a judge from Dan. Who was the judge from Dan, from the tribe of Dan? Anybody remember? He fought the Philistines. I'll give you a hint. Shimshon, very good. Very good. So Rashi says that this pasuk must be referring to Shimshon. But Shimshon was a judge who came from Dan. Dan Yadinamo, he'll take vengeance. Yinkom Nikmas Amomi pushed him. He'll take revenge for his people from the Philistines, as it states, Ki Adin Hashem Amo. Ki Achad Shiftei Yisrael. All of Israel will be at one with him. That Kulam Yadin, he'll vindicate them all. And he says, Val Shimshon Niba Nevuazu. And he made his prophecy about Shimshon. Another explanation, what does it mean? Ki Achad Shiftei Yisrael. Kim Yuchad Shebeshvatim, like the unique one amongst the tribes, which is David. Meaning to say that Samson is compared to David. How you doing, Yoav? Baruch Hashem. We're up to verse 17. Also, tell me how these are blessings. These are not really blessings.
So I was going to raise that. Aaron reading Aaron books for the teacher on Friday night, and he says none of it. He says this is all like Jacob venting at the end of his life, and the whole totally wrong. That's what
I wouldn't say none of them are blessings. Some of them.
Judah, it's ambiguous. Judah and Joseph are sort of ambiguous, but you know.
Well, Zevulun is kind of a blessing. He says you're going to be dwelling by the seashores, and you'll be doing a lot of business by the sea. That's a blessing. Dan will be like Dan is also a blessing.
Except the next sentence is Dan will be a serpent.
No, here it is positive because you see, not all of them are blessings, but this one seems pretty positive. Yidan Nachash alei derech. He is a serpent on the road. Shififon alei orach, a snake on the highway. Hanoshech ekfesus v'yiporach v'achor. Meaning, Seidan is going to be a powerful military force. He bites a horse's heel and he falls backwards. So you have to remember that this is poetry, so it's impossible for us to really know exactly the meaning of what Yaakov had in mind, but certainly you could read this as positive. And when he does want to criticize, he certainly he doesn't hold back, like Shimon and Reuven. It says, this is the way of the serpent. Rashi says, why is Jacob compare Dan to a snake that bites a horse's heel? So basically, he's comparing it to a snake that bites a horse's heel, that he falls back even though he doesn't come into direct contact. So Dan will be able to kill his enemies without coming into direct contact. Who's that like? That's like the pager, the beeper operation. Took out a whole of Hezbollah without actually a single shot being fired. Onkelos says that Nachash is like the name of a type of a snake. From if you bite it, there's no cure. Okay. And then he says, here it is, the absolute blessing. Rishuasla kivisi Hashem. For your salvation do I long, Hashem. Rashi says, Jacob is prophesizing that the Philistines would put out Samson's eyes. And in the end, he would say, remember this time that Samson prays for salvation. Meaning to say, Rashi sees Yaakov as the one who says, Vishuasla kivisi Hashem. Others see Samson as the one saying it. So he's praying for Samson there. I mean, I can see why it's not the greatest blessing, especially if you take that approach. It does seem a little strange that the whole blessing for a tribe for all of eternity centers around one person. You would expect there to be blessing, it would be a broader blessing for the tribe, but that's what he says. Okay, now we go to God. This is also a kind of a blessing. God gedud yigudenu. A troop will go forth from God. He's saying you're being militarily strong. We agud a cave, and he will troop back on tracks. Meaning to say, the simple reading, before we even go to Rashi, you're going to be a strong military force, and your force will come home. Meaning you'll be successful. You'll go out, and you'll come back. Which is, I guess, really, what more could you want as a soldier? To come home after you're done. So, Yoni's a soldier. He could tell us that the soldiers won. So, let's see what Rashi says. God gedu yugudenu. All of them, these are words for a troop. You know, that's what you call in modern Hebrew. What do you call a battalion? A gedud. A gedud. And Rashi says, God gedud, gedudim yagudu emenu. Troops will go forth from God. They'll cross the Jordan with their brothers to war. And kol chalutz achinachbars. They'll be the vanguard that go out and fight the battle. And that's how they're going to conquer the land. And then they'll come backward. Yashuvu akivem, they'll return back to their possession that they took on the Jordan River. And not one person will die. So certainly Rashi's reading of this is as a blessing. This is at worst ambiguous, but it's most likely a blessing. The next one is also a blessing, for sure. May Asher Shemei Noach Mo. Asher's food is fatty, meaning he's got very rich food. He's going to produce the delicacies for the king. Asher, he's blessing him that he's going to be a place that produces the finest foods. The oil, look at Rashi. Asher, the food which comes from Asher's territory will be rich, shamein. He'll have a lot of olives coming forth in his portion, and he's going to draw forth oil, like from a spring. And also Moshe blessed him. V'tovo b'shemen raglo. He dips his foot in oil. Like we find him in Menachos. He's referring to a story in Menachos about the tribe of Asher and oil. This is the story. There's a well-known story in Menachos 85b. I'll tell you the story. They once made a non-Jewish emissary, and they said to him, go bring us 1 million maneh of olive oil, 140,000 gallons. He went to Jerusalem. They said, go to Tyre. He went to Tyre. They said, go to Gush Chalav, which is in the territory of Asher. And there they said to him, go to so-and-so in the field. They went and found him digging ditches around his olive trees. And he said to him, do you have 1 million maneh of oil that I need? And he said, wait until I finish my work. He waited until he finished his work. And after he finished his work, he put his tools over his shoulders and he began picking up stones and throwing them out to the orchard. Like he was acting like a regular hired worker, not like a fancy rich man. And then he said, the guy the non-Jewish emissary said, I think the Jews are playing a trick on me. This guy clearly doesn't have 1 million maneh of oil. But once they arrived at the town, his servant brought out a jug of water for him, and he washed his hands and feet. She brought him a cup full of oil, and he dipped his feet in it in fulfillment of this verse from Deuteronomy. he'll dip his feet in oil. After they ate and they drank, he gave him 1,000,000 manna of oil and said, "Do you need any more?" He said, "Yes, but I don't have enough money." So the guy says, "Don't worry, I measured out another 100 I don't know exactly how many more, 180,000 manna, which is basically around 40 gallons, 40,000 gallons of oil." And he said they hired every mule, camel, and donkey in the land of Israel to carry the oil. And so, anyway, so that's the story of the oil in the tribe of Asher. Hello, Greg. Hello, Moshe. Yeah, Shekoach. So then it says, and now the next one is also kind of a blessing. What does the next one say? It says, Naphtali is a Yoa Shlucha. Naphtali is a speedy gazelle, or a hind that's sent off. I know Saint Imre Shefer. He says beautiful things. Imre Shefer, Naphtali is blessed with having a silver tongue. And what does it mean? He's a Ayala Shlucha. This is a reference, Rashi says, this is also in the Gemara, that to the valley of Ginosar, that the fruit ripens quickly, like this hind that's very quick at running. So, okay, so we see that that's also a blessing, Dan. He's very fast, and he can, we're in chapter 49, verse 23. He's very fast, and he speaks very well. What more could you want? He's Ricky Henderson. Ricky Henderson, one of probably the most entertaining baseball player I ever watched play was Ricky Henderson. He gave me so much joy. I remember when the Mets were in the playoffs and Ricky Henderson was on their team, they said, "What do you think you're going to do?" He says, "It's Ricky Henderson time." That's what he said. I laughed about that for a long time. He was great. Okay. Did anybody here ever see him play? Dan and Greg, but nobody else, right? You guys are too young. Shohei Ohtani, he's a great player, but there's nobody like Ricky Henderson. He was just this dynamo of
Is he a
energy.
shortstop?
Sure. No, Ricky Henderson was an outfielder.
Well,
He's
the shortstop's an outfielder.
All right. So then he says, then now we're up to Yosef. Yosef's blessing is the most confusing of all, in my mind. Ben Porat Yosef. Yosef is a son of grace. Ben Porat Alei Ayin, a son of grace to the eye, whatever that means. Benot Sa'ada Alei Shur. The girls step up to look at him.
Remember, we're told in really the only description, I think, in the Tanakh, or certainly about that Yosef was very good looking. In the chapter of Potiphar, we're told how good looking.
Yeah, he says he was a good looking guy. He's not the only one who was good looking, but he was good looking.
I mean, are there other men who were described as good looking as he?
I think David HaMelech is described as good.
Certainly
in the biblical, in the 5 books of Moses. I have to look at it. I have to look at it again. Okay. So anyway, this is a difficult explanation. Oh wait, we missed it out. That Rashi gave another explanation. We'll deal with Yosef tomorrow. Gave another explanation about Asher. He said about Naphtali. Maybe it's a prophecy about the war of Sisera, that you shall take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and go there quickly. And I know Saint Imre Shefer, that refers to Devorah and Barak, who sing a song of praise to God about their victory. Now, Rabbi said it speaks about the day of Jacob's burial. What happened was, this is the story when Esav laid claim to the cave of Machpelah. That's why he talks about Naphtali being quick. I'll tell you this story and then we'll daven mincha. What happened was, when Yaakov died, it came time for him to be buried in the land of Israel, in the Marat Machpelah. So they're about to bury him. And then at that moment, at that moment, Esav appeared and said, no, I have the deed to the cave. I'm supposed to be buried here. So they said, no, you sold it to our father, Yaakov. So he said, prove it. So they said, oh yeah, we have the bill of sale, but it's in Egypt. So they sent Naphtali to run back because he was the fastest. So they told Naphtali to run back to Egypt to get the bill. Meanwhile, Dan had a son who was deaf, whose name was Chush. And this deaf son, they said, what's going on? What's the delay? And they said the delay is Esav's causing these problems, and he ran back, and Naphtali had to go back to Egypt. So when Hushim heard this, he took out his knife right away and he killed it. He chopped off Esav's head. So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz asked the question: how come nobody else chopped off Esav's head? Why did I have to wait for Dan's son to do it? So Esav's head rolled into the Maras Machpelah. So the answer that Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says is such a work of genius. He says the following. He says everybody else had been part of the conversation the whole time. So the conversation kept building up and building up and building up. And so therefore, they weren't shocked when they came to the conclusion that Naphtali had to go back to Egypt to get the bill of sale to prove that his father had actually bought it. But Chushim, he hadn't heard any of this. And so he was coming in from left field. And when he heard it, he was shocked by where they had got to. He couldn't imagine like how far it had developed. He just heard that my uncle has to run back to Egypt to get the bill of sale, and the funeral's being held up. He was so outraged. So that's life. Life sometimes, the terrible things they build up, and we tolerate them along the way. And then, but if we would hear them just in a vacuum, we would just be like horrific, and we wouldn't be able to accept it. So that's the voice of Chaim Shmulevitz on this Rashi. All right, we'll stop here. Have a mincha now.